All right. Yay. Oh, no, it's the last one. Oh, Jen said that. Yeah. So tonight is week 5 of the Five to Thrive program. And this is the final Monday night gig. Tonight's all about building better bones. So, you know how this has rolled. Each week we have emphasized one of the primary menopausal, perimenopausal, I should say, but menopausal too, but mostly perimenopausal symptoms, hot flashes, night sweats, brain fog, insomnia, um, low libido, or weight gain. And so tonight we're diving into bone loss and bone strength. And this is one of the not that any of it's really glamorous, but I guess this is one of the least ones that doesn't get a whole lot of airplay until kind of it's like you're on the other side of it, like, oh shit, now I've got osteoporosis or osteopenia. I mean, it doesn't translate well to Instagram. I mean, there's no sassy photos of, you got some sassy photos of women looking all hot and sweaty, like, oh, hot flash, or some you can find some sassy photos or take a sassy photo of yourself, feeling sexy or, around libido and that kind of thing. And of course, weight loss always sells for sure. But what do you do about bone loss? I mean, it's kind of like, I'm losing my bone. Wow. Now, how does that translate into a picture in our social media driven culture that we're in? So we're going to break it apart tonight and determine how we can not only slow bone loss, but rebuild bone loss and muscle too. Muscle's going to be part of this, muscle and bone. I should have that on the screen, but muscle and bone. So anyway, here we go. So Americans spend approximately 5 billion, billion with a B, dollars a year on drugs to protect our bone health. And thinning of the bones is certainly a natural process of aging, and it's not in and of itself a problem necessarily. The problem arises when our bone porosity increases to the point where we begin to fracture hips or, God forbid, fracture a femur. And that's something that happens to about 15% of older Americans. Now, a bone scan isn't the only measurable aspect of bone health, right? I mean, it's strong and it's out there, but we also want to take into consideration other risk factors. So, in other words, do you have a history of fractures? Do you have a history of alcohol? And not just like alcohol abuse, but just like, do you have a glass of wine every night? That counts. That's a risk factor. Smoking, cigarettes, definitely. Steroid use, definitely. We also want to take into consideration height, weight, and of course, agility. I mean, ideally, even if our bones are thinning and becoming more porous, ultimately, we don't want to fall. That's kind of what I mean. There's certainly ways to have what's called an anterior vertebral fracture, which is a fracture along the front of the spine, which happens frequently in much older adults when they're bending forward. You're kind of hunching forward. But ideally for those of us who are in our 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, even in our 80s, I mean, ultimately the goal is to stay agile and to not fall in the first place, or at least be in a position to regain balance quickly. And then, of course, our mother's skeletal history. These are all telling signs of how much of a risk we are for bone or where we are with regards to our bone health and what our risk factors look like. Now, our risk increases if we are tall, or if you weigh less in your 50s than you did when you were 25. So, in other words, if your weight has decreased. And also, broken bones, any broken bones after the age of 20 also puts us at risk for decreased bone porosity, and which increases our risk then of bone fracture. So it's important to know that for women, our bone density does decrease most quickly in the first 5 years after menopause. So, right, I mean, you've hit that 1 year mark where you haven't had a cycle for a full year, 12 months with no bleeding, and then ta-da, shazam, that means now you're in menopause. So it's in that first 5 years of menopause where our bone density really tanks. Now, I think that's just important to know because after that 5-year mark, it levels off. The loss, the decrease begins to level off significantly. So in general, we gain bone mass until we're about 25 years old. It levels off at the age around the age of 35. Then we lose about a 0.5% a year until we hit menopause, which sounds pretty. I mean, if you think about it, 0.5% a year, that, I mean, depending on when you hit menopause, that could be significant. But then at menopause, we hit the 5-year speed bump. And then 5 years post menopause, our bone loss slows down to 1%, and then it backs off to 0.5% at the age of 70 and beyond. So it's important to know. I mean, I think, the bottom line is our bone is still decreasing, but there's just that speed bump right there in the first 5 years of menopause. I think that's important to know, because if you do get a bone scan during that window and your bone loss looks significantly low, just know that, just don't freak out. I mean, have a candid conversation with your doctor about it. We're going to go into some remedies and some supports for bone loss, but anyway, that 5-year mark, I think, is important to know about. Now, here's another interesting tidbit. This comes from not only Chinese medicine, but also from the world of yoga therapy. If you can get out of a chair without using your arms, then you have less than half the risk of fracture than women who can't. So this is something I do with all of my older clients that I see for yoga therapy, men and women, is we work on getting up out of a chair with no hands. No pressure on the wrist at all. And once you get that rolling, then another thing that I like to offer to my clients is to take a yoga block and put that yoga block between their knees while they're sitting. And then, have them scoot forward to the edge of the chair, breathe in, squeeze the block between their knees. And as they exhale, begin to hinge forward at their hips, hug on that block. So that's going to begin waking up the AD adductors, the inner thigh muscles, which is also connected to the pelvic floor, also connected to your core, and then boom, up you go. So anyway, that's something that you can do on your own. And if you've got older people in your life that you want to see them live long and independent for as long as possible, it's a great little exercise to have them get up out of the dining room chair, a church pew, a folding chair, just something to practice on a regular basis. Because when we can get out of a chair without using our arms, we have less than half the risk of fracture than women who can't get out of a chair without using their arms. In fact, I look at the quadriceps as our muscles of independence. More people end up in a nursing home because of their inability to get out of a chair than anything else. So keeping your quadriceps strong, squats, lunges, I know, but keeping the quads strong is really important for long-term independence and autonomy. So the perspective from the West, of course, conventional perspective is a decrease of estrogen. Absolutely. From the Ayurvedic perspective, we're looking once more at Vata, the winds, the air and space elements, creating an excess of wind in the body. So the Mamsa Dhatu, Mamsa is the word for muscle. So we've got too much wind in the muscle tissue, or the muscle tissue. And then Ashti is bone. So we've got too much wind in the muscle, too much wind that's eating away at the bone. And when I think about wind and Vata, one of the analogies that I like to use frequently is like the high mountain peaks. If you've ever done any hiking in the Rocky Mountains, you know that nothing really grows above tree line at 11,000 feet. And the higher you get into 13 and 14,000 feet, I mean, it's just the wind just batters the mountain, right? There's not much lush happening up there. The oxygen is thin. The air is very subtle and very light. It's not very hospitable. And all that wind just hammers the mountains. So it's that's the analogy to think of internally as well. All of the wins, think stress, think anxiety, think just motion, too much motion and activity, and all of that wind just kind of buffeting our bones and our muscle. When we have an excess of vata in the ashti dhatu, the bone tissue, we can see that with osteoporosis. Is osteopenia and osteoporosis are certainly a result of that. Chipping nails, even, and hair loss are also results of that. So some telltale signs. Now, this screen, I want to dive into. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time here, but for those of you who have a real keen interest in Ayurveda, and I've mentioned before the 7 layers of tissue, I want to just roll into this real quick, and then if it piques your interest, there's a lot. You can learn a lot online, and you'll see this pretty much in every Ayurvedic textbook for sure. So the concept is that the body is comprised of a lot of things, but there are 7 layers of tissue. And tissue can be a word for organ, but it's more than that, right? So let's break this down. Each tissue, each tissue gets fed, and then its leftovers, so to speak, feed the next tissue in line. Okay, so here's what we've got. Ahara means food. This is the food we're eating, whether it's a Happy Meal from McDonald's, or whether it's a beautiful organic salad or grain bowl that you've made at home. Doesn't matter. The ahara is the food that we're consuming, the food and the drink that we're consuming. That food, first initially, as we start digesting it, the digested product of the initial intake goes to feed the lymphatic system. That's the rasa. The lymphatic system uses what it needs and then gives the leftovers to the blood, our circulatory system with blood, the rakta dhatu. The blood uses what it needs and then gives its leftovers to the mamsa, the muscle tissue, the muscle layer of the body. The muscle uses the nutrients that it can get from the leftovers and uses it to build muscle, and gives its leftovers to the fat tissue. Fat feeds the bone, bone feeds the nerve finally feeds the reproductive tissue. So the point that I think is most important, because this is, I mean, it took me I'm not the sharpest stick in the woods, right? When I started learning this, it took me a while to really wrap my brain around this, and then finally I had a light bulb moment. But it took a while. It's like the dunce in the class, like, I don't get it. But I think if the takeaway here is our body is constantly engaged in building and rebuilding tissue. The food that we eat should be of high quality. And our digestive system, our Agni, our digestive fire, needs to be working optimally. Those two things have to happen in order for the leftovers of each tissue to then have enough nutrient to feed the next layer of tissue. And notice the tissues that are the last to be fed are bone, and that's really important for us women, particularly women who lean towards having thinner bones. Our bone is among the last to be fed. Our nerves and our nervous system is among the last to be fed. And then the final is our reproductive tissues. So if the food we're eating is subpar, right? Or if it's not really food, if it's GMO, or it's laden with chemicals and pesticides, or it's an ingredient that the body doesn't recognize as food, well, that's a problem, because then the lymphatic system is not going to know what to do with it, because the digestive system doesn't know what to do with it. Then compound that with, if our body's digestive system is subpar, then we're certainly not going to be able to feed a good solid bolus of nutrition to all of the layers of tissue. So just, I guess the most important thing is that is that we require, in order to feed and bring nourishment and nutrition to our bone, to our nervous system, and to finally our reproductive tissues, we have to be eating wholesome, high quality, real food that the body recognizes as such. And we have to have a good, strong, steady digestive system. If either of those two are compromised, then this whole cascade, this whole domino effect will be compromised. So remember that yin, right? Yin is building, and yang, those are the stress hormones. So the yin hormones, if you remember from way back in session 1, the yin hormones are the estrogen and the progesterone. Those are our building, nourishing um, 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 hormones. Thank you. And the yang hormones, those are the cortisol, the adrenaline, those are which are necessary. We need them. But if they are in excess, they can be very depleting. And we've touched base on that already, on how important stress reduction is and how important it is to ensure that our adrenal glands are getting the rest that they need and the replenishment that they need. So our yin hormones, or our sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone, they serve more to build and maintain bone density, whereas the overproduction of the yang hormones, the stress hormones, contributes to the thinning of bones. Okay, so we can have good quality yin, good quality estrogen and progesterone, if we consume good quality food and if we digest it properly. Okay, so that's just like a super condensed version of the 7 layers of tissue. It's a really fascinating area of of research. Very interesting. Oh, let me go back one more thing. So down here at the bottom, the very final production is OJAS. That's the very last thing that's produced. So again, high quality food and a strong, steady digestive system is absolutely necessary in order to not only feed all the tissues and keep our body replenishing and rebuilding itself through the wear and tear of not only aging, but just our 2023 lifestyle, in our careers and this, that, and the other, but also building OJAS. And OJAS, if you remember from previous sessions, OJAS is that end result. It's the essence. It's the final result of the food that we eat. And OJAS, while we don't have a truly accurate definition in English, we call it vitality or immunity or strength. Those are 3 words that are commonly used interchangeably to describe OJAS. And everybody wants more OJAS. Everybody needs more OJAS in their life. So high quality food, strong digestion, that's how we get it. One of the ways we get it. Okay, so let's talk about treatment. In the West, in conventional medicine, vitamin D has long been used alongside calcium as the cornerstone of over-the-counter osteoporosis treatment. I mean, since 2011, adequate vitamin D and calcium have been like the first go-tos for OTC treatments. Back in 2011, that's when the National Academy of Medicine was advising that everybody have about 600 to 800 IUs a day. And that's just for the general population. And this was based on research indicating that vitamin D supplementation might support calcium absorption, which could inhibit bone deterioration. However, just in the last 6 months, there's been groundbreaking study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine that supplementation, vitamin D supplementation, might not be all that we thought it was. The study found that it didn't have an impact on reducing bone fractures in older adults, but it's important to keep in mind vitamin D does so much more for us, in addition to or instead of just what we thought of as treating our bones or enhancing calcium absorption. So the conclusion of the study is that vitamin D supplementation didn't result in a significantly lowered risk of fractures than the placebo in the study. important with vitamin D. Vitamin D deficiency definitely is a thing here in the West for sure. So know your levels, get your levels checked. I kind of think, if I remember correctly, that's something you have to ask for. I don't think it's just part of a metabolic panel, but that might have changed. The last time I was at my doctor, I had to request it. But yeah, I think it's important to know that. I think it's important to get in the sun, get in the sun 10 minutes a day. First thing in the morning would be ideal. One of my teachers at school out in California, she always said naked at noon. That was like that was her way of getting vitamin D. Naked for 10 minutes, right at high noon. And I was like, okay, naked at noon. Typical Northern California. Forgot we're all getting naked at noon. So calcium. So do we take calcium citrate or do we take calcium carbonate? Well, it depends. So the citrate is the most bioavailable, and it's absorbed independent of stomach acids. Now, the reason that's important is because stomach acid typically declines with age. And so if that's you, citrate's good because we don't really need the stomach acid to absorb it. Now, the calcium carbonate does require adequate stomach acid for absorption. It's best taken with meals. But the biggest advantage with carbonate is that the amount of calcium per pill is higher, so that you actually need to take less. So the pill burden is lessened with carbonate. It's just a matter of it's just, again, it comes down to your digestive fire and your digestive system. And if you have a steady production of acid and you're not struggling with hypoacidity, or you're not taking PPIs to curb hyperacidity, then citrate might work for you. Protein is important, absolutely important in older adults, and by older adults I'm referring to 75 years and older. 20 grams a day has been shown to improve clinical outcomes for older adults, 75 and older, 20 grams a day. And there are some sources out there that show that an increase in animal protein actually hinders calcium absorption. So get your protein from plants, and you can do that. You can absolutely do that. Legumes, chickpeas, plants, there's nuts, seeds. There's a lot of ways to get protein out there. You can get 20 grams of protein easy without mowing down on a porterhouse, I assure you. And of course, exercise is important. A review of 18 randomized controlled trials reported that aerobics, weight bearing, and resistance exercises were all effective in enhancing bone mineral density of the spine. Even walking is effective at improving BMD in the spine and the hips. There are 6 studies that evaluated aerobic exercise that had moderately positive effect. In fact, 67% of the group demonstrated benefits versus the non-exercising groups. Now, estrogen replacement therapy, hormone replacement therapy, or using estrogen, there's absolutely a time and a place for it. I'm not here to bash it at all. I just think it's important to know the risks and to have a candid conversation with your doctor about the risks of therapy, your risks of not taking it versus your risk of taking it. And I think that's important. That needs to be weighed out. And that's purely an individual, that's a very personal and individual determination. And of course, talk to your doctor about how long you should be on it, because there are some studies about, the longer you're on it and at certain ages, it's contraindicated. And then there are other conditions and ages in which it would be indicated. So estrogen replacement therapy does slow osteoporosis, but it doesn't prevent or reverse it. So that would be a consideration if it's very clear that lifestyle, dietary, and herbal supplementation are just insufficient, and there are going to be cases for that for sure. I do want to say, and I don't have it on the screen, but I do want to mention briefly a couple of things. First of all, Fosamax. Fosamax in 2008, Fosamax is kind of the go-to prescription drug pharmaceutical for treating osteoporosis. And in 2008, the FDA issued an alert that warned against the possibility of severe and sometimes incapacitating bone, joint, and or muscle pain in patients taking this category, this class of drugs. So if Fosamax comes up with your healthcare provider, again, I would spend, an hour or 90 minutes online and dive into the research and, look for legit articles. Go to the British Medical Journal, go to the Journal of American Medical Association, go to like really high high quality journals and do your research, take it with you, take printed copies with you and have a very candid conversation with your doctor about Fosamax. And there are studies suggesting that there's very little extra benefit in taking this classification of bone drugs for longer than 5 years. So again, just like with estrogen, I think it's important to be educated, own your body, own your decisions, and weigh out the risks of if I don't take it versus if I do take it, and then what's the timing of that. The other classification of drugs that I want to mention here are SSRIs, right? And so these are the antidepressant drugs such as Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft, and Celexa. They've been implicated in a 4% increase in bone loss and about double the number of falls compared with people that aren't taking that classification of drugs. And again, it's not to say that these medications don't have a time and a place. They absolutely do. But all too often they're the first immediate choice rather than a last resort. And again, I just think it's important to grab the studies and have a conversation with your healthcare provider, because you want to weigh it out. I mean, if there's a history with anxiety, depression, and this medication is keeping you upright and vertical and keeping your mortgage paid and getting you to work on time, you just have to weigh out the pros and cons, the risks and the benefits of being on the medication and the risk of falls, that sort of thing. So again, it's it's just a very personal conversation and decision that you can make with your doctor. So with regards to how we handle it in Eastern medicine or in Ayurvedic medicine in particular, first and foremost, practicing the 3 R's: regulate Agni, regulate your digestive fire, and all that information is back in week number 1. Do you have a low fire? Do you have a high fire? Do you have a variable fire? Do you have a steady fire? We're looking for that steady, easy, even keeled fire where the appetite is strong, and your food is digesting well and thoroughly. And then we want to remove ama. So ama, remember, we see it on the tongue, or we see it in our bowel movements, or we smell it maybe if our sweat is becoming extra foul, or we see it with skin breakouts. Oftentimes, once we regulate our digestive fire, the ama starts to take care of itself. So regulate Agni, remove ama, and then we can rebuild the ojas. I spoke of this briefly last week. So remember, with those herbs, particularly those herbs for the libido, so many of them are heavier herbs. They're more grounding herbs, and those are great. But if we are presenting with ama, we don't want to build on that. We want to clean house first, then bring in the new furniture. That makes sense, then throw down the new rug kind of thing, but don't throw down a brand new rug over a dirty floor. How's that for an analogy? So okie dokie. All right, next. Yeah, okay. We can build strength and mass in our muscle tone, right? The Mamsa Dhatu, for those of you keeping track at home of your Ayurvedic vernacular. The Mamsa Dhatu by pacifying Vata, regulating Agni, eating clean proteins, and taking muscle tonic herbs, right? And that would be like ashwagandha, amalaki, even fenugreek is considered a muscle tonic herb. And of course, daily strength building exercises. I think that's super important as we age. I think every woman from the age of 40 on needs to be lifting weights. I mean, even if it's just like a 2 or 3 pound dumbbell that you just do 10 or 20 reps a day, but or do some incline push-ups. You don't have to get all the way onto the floor, but just do some push-ups against the wall until you build the strength to do push-ups against a chair, the seat of a chair, and then build the strength to do push-ups on your knees on the floor, just like 5 at a time, but work your way up towards that in increments. But a daily, lifting, just there's an article out there about women lifting heavy shit, which I just think is funny. Now, I'm not saying you've got to go join a CrossFit gym and throw tires across the room unless that's your jam. I just think, you want to be able to lift. You want to be able to, lift a chair. You want to be able to lift something that's, 30 pounds, maybe 20 pounds. I don't know, something like that. Anyway, build your bones, build your muscle. And then we can circumvent bone loss through an alkaline diet. And this, ladies, you're already doing it. So an alkaline diet is primarily plant-based. Does that mean you can never have seafood or a piece of good high quality meat? No, absolutely not. But it means that most of the time you're eating plant-based with adequate minerals. You're limiting or avoiding foods that are considered acidic. This is done. I mean, you can just be like, check, 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 because these items are artificial sugars, artificial processed flours, meat, soda, alcohol, coffee. All those fall in the category of acidic foods. And boom, you're like, that's a done deal with you. And then, of course, increasing your weight-bearing exercise. So with regards to botanicals, now there's bone building herbs that there's 4 in particular. There's dandelion, and dandelion's actually in your liver detox tea. Dandelion, horsetail, nettles, and clover are all like they're in the top 5 category of bone building herbs, and black cohosh. So here comes Remy Femin again. I should probably buy stock in this company for as much as I recommend it. But here comes Remy Femin again. Now, these are animal studies, to be clear, but 2 different animal studies showed positive results using black cohosh extract in inhibiting bone loss. Definitely more studies are needed, but Remy Femin shows up for us again as a potential winner, because when you look at the ingredient label on a box of Remy Femin, all it is black cohosh. So this study provides strong evidence that Remy Femin could be used for the prevention of clinical postmenopausal osteoporosis. Now you can take a screenshot because I got the study listed for you down there at the bottom of the screen. Remember, Remy Femin, you can buy it over the counter. You can get it online at Amazon. And then nettles. Nettles are very high in vitamins A, the B complex vitamins C, D, K, and in the minerals calcium, magnesium, manganese, iron, and so many more. Taking nettles in the way of an infusion is my preferred recommendation. Nettles nourish and strengthen and rebuild kidneys and our adrenals, so super important to remember that about our adrenal glands as well as our endocrine glands. Nettles have been shown to rehydrate dry vaginal tissues, and nettles are really good for healthy skin and hair and strong flexible bones. So an infusion is different than a tea, right? So a tea is taking a small amount of herb, a teaspoon or maybe 2 teaspoons of herb, and steeping it for 5 to 7 minutes, maybe 10 at the most. An infusion is taking a large amount of herbs, and I'll be honest, I don't measure it out. I take a handful of herb, throw it into a French press, pour hot water in there, and let it steep for a long period of time. So larger amount of herb, longer steeping period. I'm talking overnight, and then you have a quart of infusion. Now, the fun thing about using infusions, particularly where bone health is concerned, is that we can mix and match. So you can just make a straight nettle infusion and drink a quart of it 4 times a week. Yeah, you can keep it in your fridge, but I would take it out and and let it get a little bit to room temperature, much like a wine that you would open the bottle, a red in particular, open the bottle and let it aerate, and the texture, the flavor, the characteristics of the wine actually change, and they soften and they blossom. Likewise with an infusion, you can keep it in the fridge just to keep it safe, but then take it out in the morning and let it get a little room temperature, and then drink it all day. You can make infusions taste really good. I'm going to give you some more ideas here in just a minute. So nettles is definitely one that you can get your hands on. You can order it bulk through Star West Botanicals or Mountain Rose Herbs. They're a very high quality company. Horsetail. Horsetail is very popular among herbalists and botanists because it contains silicon, and silicon is a mineral that's needed for bone health. So it's a favorite among herbalists for restoring bone density and even for healing fractures. Don't have a lot of studies on that, but there's a lot of anecdotal information out there online that people are using it for that. There are a couple of studies you'll find that indicate a significant increase in bone mineral density. Again, taking an infusion or an extract. So again, the extract would be like your Kutki extract, right? So you can mix horsetail with nettle and have a horsetail nettle infusion. Okay, this is where it's fun. You can mix and match these things. Let's see, green tea. Oh, I want to say something about dandelion. Dandelion, you could just be eating that. Most, the leafy greens, like most leafy greens, dandelion is very rich in minerals and vitamins. And then green tea. So this is interesting. Who knew? But green tea may actually mitigate bone loss and decrease the risk of osteofractures. Green tea contains polyphenols, right? And this study that's at the bottom from Science Daily down here, Science Daily refers to the study of 500 milligrams daily of green tea. Now that would be, if you're drinking it, that would be a lot of green tea. So you would take it as extract form, or maybe take it in capsule form. And you can get that decaffeinated, both extract or capsule form. So the study that Science Daily references in the link at the bottom of the screen shows that green tea polyphenols plus Tai Chi increased bone alkaline phosphates, improved muscle strength, and was very well tolerated. So, a little green tea for the win. Soy gets a bad rap in our country. And I want to address it, that it's what should be getting the bad rap are the fake soys, or the soy isolates, like what's found in a soy protein powder. But soy in its whole food form, such as non-GMO organic tofu, tempeh, tamari, edamame, even unsweetened soy milk, that's good for us. It's actually very, very good for us. So phytoestrogens are found abundantly in legumes, in soy products, and even in alfalfa. I gotta scoot forward a bit. Oh, there we go. Kind of losing my chair. And there's where's my okay, here's my notes. So probably by now, most of us at our age are well aware of these studies that we've just kind of, I remember hearing them through the grapevine when I was in my 30s and 40s, of the studies documenting that Japanese women who consumed 35 to 60 milligrams of phytoestrogen a day, and they consumed this in easily digestible forms of soy, so cooked tofu, soy sauce, miso. They had lower incidence rather of breast cancer than women who consumed a more typical Western diet. However, when Japanese women moved into the US and adopted the same Western diet, their rates of cancer increased to the quote American rates. And you can find the studies out there, and these studies have been proven enough through enough different studies that this is just accepted as true. Now, the form in which we ingest soy makes really all the difference between whether it has a good or a bad effect, a positive or a negative effect on our endocrine system. If it's easily digestible, it's chances are it's going to be beneficial. However, if it's concentrated, powdered, or highly processed, then no, chances are it's not going to be beneficial. Anything that's highly processed at all is not going to be beneficial. So, overconsumption of highly processed concentrate forms of any food has resounding negative effects. So, the bottom line is eating whole soy foods may decrease the risk of breast cancer, fibroids, and even inflammation. It is helpful for bone and heart health and menopausal symptoms. In fact, now we've seen in the last couple of years, there have been studies published showing that a plant-based diet, rich in soy, can decrease hot flashes up to 88%. That's crazy. I mean, that's fabulous, but that's wild. That's fantastic. Um, so while eating whole soy foods had these benefits, eating highly processed soy foods did not have these benefits. So when we separate protein from soybeans and use it to make soy protein isolate, that's no good, right? So the isolate may not be healthy and has been shown to actually increase insulin-like growth factor. So stick with real food, stick with whole foods, stick with, if you've read anything by Michael Pollan, I'm trying to remember the book out of which this quote comes. It's probably the most famous of his quotes. Eat real food, mostly plants, not too much. There's here's an example protocol for a bone healthy diet and lifestyle. Decrease stress, always going to be at the top of our list. Eliminate the processed stuff, white flour, white sugar. So these are all the acidic foods. You're already there. Drink a quart of an herbal infusion 4 times a week. Nettle, red clover. Can you see this? Nettle, red clover, oat straw. Any of those would be great. You can mix and match. Exercise daily and always include weight bearing. Even if you just did that 4 days a week, 5 days a week would be great. You don't have to, again, you don't have to be like, lifting 250-pound squats, whatever it is they do at the CrossFit gyms, but just like pump some hand weights would be great. And eat a calcium rich diet, and supplement where you need to. There's a study. There was a year-long study which I actually got out of, and I think it's one of these studies at the bottom of your screen, but I actually got it out of Susan Weed's book, The Postmenopausal Years. She cites it in her book, a year-long study in which exercise, 50 minutes, 4 days a week, 50 minutes of a vigorous walk is what the study had women doing 4 days a week, and a calcium-rich diet. And by that, the study had women eating 1,650 milligrams of calcium a day. Now that's a lot. We typically aim for 800 to 12 milligrams of calcium a day, and you can get that. You can get that absolutely. 1,650 is a lot, but it's doable. So, but here's the thing. In this study, and it was a year-long study, women exercised for 50 minutes, 4 days a week. They ate a super high calcium rich diet, and it reversed osteoporosis and increased bone mass. So that's kind of a big deal. And you can take a look at the studies at the bottom of the screen. So I want to say this about calcium. It's important to recognize that calcium is not in milk. It's in the soil. Okay, that's where it starts anyway. So it gets taken up through the root system of plants, which are then eaten by the dairy cows. This assumes, however, that you're purchasing milk that's coming from organic grass-fed dairy cattle, right? So recent studies report that higher milk and dairy consumption doesn't necessarily lower the risk of osteoporosis and hip fracture. Milk is not the most critical factor for bone health. In fact, it's better to be physically active than to drink more milk. This comes from Stanford nutrition scientist, Dr. Christopher Gardner. The Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine calls the dairy and bone health link a milk myth. There's a large scale study that was done through Harvard, finding zero evidence that drinking milk, eating yogurt can prevent bone fractures or osteoporosis. The takeaway: eat more plants, leafy greens, calcium, broccoli, calcium, Brussels, calcium, kale, calcium, collards, calcium. All of those are loaded. And the other factor to keep in mind, or to maybe learn for the first time, is the absorption rates. Now, calcium absorption from plants, from leafy greens, is actually higher than calcium absorption from cow's milk or dairy. Beans and legumes are also a good source of calcium. So if with dairy, our body only absorbs about 30% of what we take in. So whereas with plants, our body absorbs up to 50% of what we take in. So I think that's important to know, that that whole milk mustache thing, and milk, it does a body good. My husband calls them the milk mafia. He's like, it's just follow the money. And I will say, I'll add, and I don't have it on the screen, but I will add that the physicians, tell me I'm recording this. Am I recording this? The Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. I don't think I'm recording this. The Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine is a great website to explore. And oh my gosh, you guys, did I not record this? Oh, good, I'm recording. Thank God. All right, hold on. I had to stop the screen share for a moment because I just had a freak out that I wasn't recording any of this. I was going to have to do it all over, which I'd be happy to do, of course. Okay, so anyway, so just, when it comes to dairy and yogurt and cheese, of course, actually cheese is one of the most condensed forms of xenoestrogens and excess estrogens out there on the market. And that goes back to session number 1. Okay, anyway, so that's what I wanted to say about the botanicals, and some ways that you can get these bone building herbs into your daily routine in a tasty way that's been studied and proven to be effective. So now let's talk about, you're done with the allotonic. Yay! You're done with the liver detox tea. Yay! You're done with the kutki. Yay! The liver pills, I'm going to encourage you to just take them until you run out of them. Just keep roll through the rest of that bottle and be done with the liver pills. Now, in your care kit, you have this item, this product right here, this Women's Natural Transition. Now, I put this into all of the kits for every group that goes through this program with me. Some of you will want to take it. Some of you might not need it yet. Some of you might not want to ever take it, but it's here, it's yours, you've got it. Put it on the shelf if you want to hang on to it, or hand it on to your sister or something. But this is, I think this is an excellent supplement to include as you're moving into perimenopause and into your menopause and postmenopausal years. There's probably maybe 10 or 11 ingredients in here, and I want to just mention a couple of them. So Shatavari, ashwagandha, we talked about those last week. Vidari we didn't talk about, but it falls in this category of grounding, heavy, nurturing, and nourishing herbs that support the body's natural balance of hormones, specifically during menopause. They're all very grounding to Vata. So again, you can think kind of stress reduction, calming the body, calming the mind, calming the nervous system. Guduchi is also in this formula. Guduchi is a very cooling herb. It calms excess heat in the body. From the Ayurvedic perspective, it's one of our first lines of defense when there's like a UTI, bladder infection, or a UTI. I spoke of the vaginal suppositories last week, and typically for women who are going through perimenopause and postmenopausal, they use a suppository that I make that's infused with herbs that are very replenishing and nourishing and lubricating to the vaginal tissues to support vaginal dryness and the thinning of the vaginal tissues. But there's also a suppository that I make that's specific to address too much heat, right? So that would be infection, that would be cystitis, that would be, like chronic UTIs or bladder infections. And guduchi is like it's the first herb in the pot to get infused into the oil to make the suppositories. Guduchi is great. This Banyan Botanicals product, Women's Natural Transition, also contains Brahmi and a really lovely herb called Shank Pushpi, which I mentioned I think it was back in week 2 with the sleep. Or was it the hot flashes? It was either the hot flash or it was the sleep. It was either week 2 or week 3. Shank Pushpi works is very cooling to the body and calming to the nervous system. In fact, Shank-pushpi has an affinity for the nervous system. And Brahmi is our go-to brain herb. In fact, the leaf of the Brahmi plant is shaped just like the cerebellum. I mean, it's a really fabulous, fabulous illustration of nature showing us exactly what this can be used for. It's shaped like the cerebellum. So these two items are great for rejuvenation, for mind, memory, concentration, and kind of wrapping the nervous system in a weighted blanket, so to speak, with the Shank Pushpi. And then Arjuna, if anybody on the screen has ever read or done any studying of the Bhagavad Gita, you know that Arjuna is he's the hero, he's the main character, he's the dude that is that the whole Gita is about. He and Krishna are having this conversation throughout the whatever it is 18 or 19 chapters of the Gita about how to live your purpose and put your yoga, so to speak, into action. And Arjuna, there's also an herb called Arjuna, which promotes the emotions of courage and strength and love and acceptance, which is, I think it's really sweet that Banyan Botanicals puts that herb into this formula, because this is such a time of shift and transition for women, particularly women who, have been very identified with like their children, or like have become very identified with their children, and that that dharma, the dharma to be a mom, the dharma to the purpose, or dharma to procreate in that way. And so, I mean, there are a lot of women that I speak to that when their quote fertile years are over, it's like a big loss of identity. Like, what now? And I really try to find ways to encourage everyone to embrace this next chapter, because you've got a good 30 or 40, 45 years ahead of you. Let's embrace this as the freedom years, and go easy on yourself, and be tender with your heart, and practice forgiveness, not only of others, but of yourself, and practice acceptance, again, of others, of course, but also accepting of yourself, accepting the shift of your body, accepting the shift of your emotions, accepting the shift of your libido. I mean, it's okay if you don't want to have sex for a while. That's fine. Accepting that this is a puberty. This is like hormonal transition. And not that we necessarily just have to sit back and take it, but to some degree we got to kind of just like we're along for the ride. And use the tools that are available to us, diet, lifestyle, always first, stress reduction, right up there with lifestyle, and then begin to experiment with the botanicals that speak to you, that sound like they would be appropriate for you with your situation and your challenges. Give it a shot and see how it feels. So when we talk about just the last couple of minutes, I want to talk briefly about the reintroduction. So in week 5, this is the time, if you care to bring back foods that you've eliminated, or drinks that you've eliminated for these first 4 weeks. Now, having gone through this program now with women 5 different times, I hear time and time and time again that by week 5, most of us are feeling so freaking good, or like, Kara sleeping so well. It's like I've reclaimed my sleep. Okay, so let's not give that up. you know, think back to how it felt 5 weeks ago and what propelled you to join this program. What were your symptoms? What was the agitation that like brought you into this, and how is it now? And if it's better now, that says something. So I encourage everyone to stay with it. Let this program, really solidify a lifestyle. And frankly, that's why I designed it to be 5 weeks, because I wanted to give you a full 4 weeks, a full 21 to 28 days of just habit, routine, just getting into this food system, getting the junk out of your system and bringing the high prana, God made foods into your system, and recognizing that, wow, my body's responding in a way that who knew? So when it comes to reintroduction, if you want to bring back cheese, or you want to bring back, your nightly glass of wine or whatever, just bring back one thing at a time. Give yourself at least 48 hours. And it's not a bad idea to have a little journal and document, how do I feel? How does it taste? How does it leave my mouth feeling? What's my tongue look like the next day? How are my bowel movements the next day? How's my belly about 20 or 30 minutes after I eat? How's my energy after I eat? How's my head? Do I feel bright and vibrant and ready to go? Or do I feel like, wah, wah, wah? Am I going into a food coma? How do I want to feel? And how will this make me feel? Those are your 2 questions with regards to food and lifestyle from this point forward. How do I want to feel, knowing how you can feel? And how will this make me feel? And then moving forward, I encourage you to, we've got a week still, and we're going to be on Facebook, and we're going to be chatting, and you've got another email coming from me on Friday. So we're not totally done yet. Don't throw it all out just yet, because you've got me for another week. We've got yoga Thursday night to do. But I encourage you to start thinking about the 90-10 rule, right? So 90% of the time, eat these God-made foods that are plant-based, heavy on the plants, heavy on the fiber. And then 10% of the time, let yourself go for it. Have the birthday cake. Eat the burger if you want. Or enjoy the cheese plate. At the next office party or whatever. But 10% of the time, if you're going to go for it, really go for it. So what that means, excuse me, is no shame, no blame, no guilt. Okay. You're going to go for it, make a deliberate and intentional decision. I'm going to eat that, or I'm going to drink that. Enjoy every sip, enjoy every bite, savor every bite. Notice how you feel. And then the next day, get back to your good, healthy, strong, plant-based and God-made food choices. So when you do give in, I shouldn't say give in even, because I don't mean that. Let me take that back. Give in. Because I don't like the way that sounds. When you do, how about this? When you do dive in, deliberately dive into that cupcake or whatever it is, I want you to make it count. Really make it count. Don't just inhale it, but taste it, chew it, really, really enjoy it. And then take your trifle up. or any other digestive aid that's going to support you. And then feel good about yourself. Ayurveda preaches and teaches that we should taste all of life. And this program, Five to Thrive, is not meant to be a program of restriction, a program of suffering at all. This is a program of exploration, abundance, and bounty. This is a program that's designed to show all of us that there's so much available out there to us that nourishes us on such a level that we don't really need to eat as much because the flavor is so packed, and because our body recognizes it as real food. And so we begin recognizing the hunger cues and the cues of satiety. So taste life, taste what's on your plate, taste what's in your glass, and make it all count. So from this point forward, when this week is up, I would just reiterate to you that menopause is a normal shift. There's nothing pathological about this. A return to whole foods, again, what I call God-made foods rather than man-made or lab-made foods, and a significant reduction in your stress will allow your body the time it needs to actually manage the fluctuating hormones. So hormones are always going to be fluctuating down to the minute they're fluctuating. They're in constant motion because they're messengers. They're in constant motion, sending messages to every part of our body. So when we reduce stress and we feed ourselves well, and our digestion is working properly, and our livers are working optimally, then our body has time to respond and react to the hormonal fluctuations. All right, babes, there we go. Okay. All right, John is out. So I don't know, so John has got a message in the chat box. I'm going to have to leave at 8. Okay, this has been very enlightening. She is diagnosed with osteopenia. She's increasing her soy intake. Interested in doing some infusions. Yes, I will. Yes, I will get. Oh, I've got a great infusion recipe. Yeah. Good. Awesome, John. That's great. Okay. Yeah. Let me make a note of that. I'm going to put an infusion recipe I'll put it on the Facebook page. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you so, so much. It's just past the top of the hour, so I want you all to go and have your tea or whatever it is you need to do to soothe yourself to get to bed, oil your feet and all the things. Sleep really well tonight, and I'll get this recording out to you all tomorrow. And I want to hear from you in our private Facebook group, and let's keep that going. Let's keep that going this week. I'm not going to shut the Facebook group down for a few weeks after the program, and then I'll pull you all into the Hive, the alumni group. Those of you that want to come, not mandatory, but there's a lot of fun stuff happening over there, and it's free. There's no charge for that. It's just a community for all of us to keep bantering about. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for your attention and your presence tonight. I appreciate each of you so, so, so much. Have a great night. Sleep well.